You, Congressman, for making the issue of jobs the front and center issue. We've been here all week long, and one of the things that I find just shocking is that we have not dealt with the issues that are really in front of the American people, and the number one issue is jobs. We haven't dealt with the future jobs that students could perhaps get if they got the education, which has to do with the doubling of interest rates on student loans, which is due in a few weeks, unless the Republican majority acts. We certainly have not taken up the transportation bill that would extend, extensive work to people. As many as 280,000 education jobs are on the chopping block in the upcoming school year due to pressure on state budgets. So the bottom line is that this is an interesting week that we live in, because there is no doubt no one of the 435 members of this body are under any doubt. Student loan rates are doubling, unemployment is record high, and yet we didn't deal with any of these critical issues. I'm really shocked. I'm astounded. I'm under the impression that we're all here to work hard. I'm one of those who doesn't like to sort of imply or even say that the Republicans are sabotaging jobs for political advantage, because it's hard for me to imagine that any true public servant would ever do something like that. But, you know, there's a lot of folks out here who believe that is the case. I want our Republican colleagues to disprove that premise by getting some pro-job, pro-education legislation that we all can agree on. You know, one other thing that I'm glad to talk about is in regards to the Obama job plan, which, under the American Jobs Act, Obama has laid out a plan. He has set forth a set of ideas, and one of the elements that I want to talk about a little bit is the job program for the long-term unemployed. Obama has talked about dealing with the issues of the long-term unemployed. People who've been out of work, and who've been chronically unemployed for a long time, they call them the 99ers. It's modeled after an unemployment program in Georgia, and under that program, workers continue to collect unemployment benefits plus a small stipend to cover transportation and other expenses at no expense to the employer. After 8 weeks of training, the company may hire the person or not, and it could amount to a free tryout. So, I mean, I think that the Obama administration, under the American Jobs Act, is being responsive to the needs of the American people. The same cannot be said for the House of Representatives under the Republican majority. Under the American Jobs Act, the Republicans could bring it up today. Some of these ideas are things that they have proposed, and they won't even take those up. So this is really disappointing. I think people who have been chronically unemployed for weeks and weeks and maybe perhaps years. I talked to a woman who had been out of work for 2.5 years. This woman has a college degree. She is a highly trained professional from my district. If Lauren, if you're watching, you know that I'm talking about you. And I think the American Jobs Act has just what the doctor ordered if the Republican majority would take it up. I yield back.
Well, Mr. Ellison, in your community and my community, people want to go to work. They want a job. They want to be able to be part of the American machine that creates the wealth of this economy. And they want to have the opportunity to provide the money for their family, take care of the needs. They take pride in their work. They're hard-working people, but they can't make it. And we have a long, long tradition in America that dates back to the very first day of the American modern government. The day George Washington was sworn into office, he undertook an industrial policy. Now, I know our Republican colleagues like to talk about the Founding Fathers. Well, they really ought to listen to the Founding Fathers. And if they had listened to the Founding Fathers, they would have paid attention to the President's proposal on the American Jobs Act, because here's what George Washington did. He turned to his Treasury Secretary, Alexander Hamilton, and said, Mr. Hamilton, we need to grow this economy. We need to put people to work. We need to be a strong nation, a strong economy. And I want you, Mr. Hamilton, to develop a policy to do that. Hamilton came back a few months later with an industrial policy. About 13 different items on about 5 pages. Now it'd probably take 5,000 pages, but nonetheless, he did it. Do you know what was in it? What was in that industrial policy that Hamilton presented to Washington and to Congress and mostly implemented over the next decade or so were policies that, let me put this back up. Let's see here. How many of these were in it? And here's the great what if. There was a transportation part to those policies. In fact, 2 different ones. One, Hamilton said, if we're going to grow this economy, we need to have good roads. We need to have good canals, and we need to improve our ports. And he proposed legislation that did become law, some of it by the states, some of it by the national government, that created the canal systems, put the roads in place, and improved the ports of America. Very beginnings of this nation. Pay attention, my colleagues who like to talk about the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers said, we need in America to have a transportation program. Currency reform was on the agenda. Yes, it was. Hamilton, Treasury Secretary, said, we need to pay attention to the currency issue. There was a huge fight going on at the time about federal bank, about the currency issues, but he said we needed a common currency and we need to be aware of the international exchange rates that were going on so that we were not put at a disadvantage. There was a Buy American program. Hamilton told George Washington, the Founding Fathers, that we needed to put in place a Buy America provision. You just heard our colleague from Oregon talk about a robust Buy American provision. And sometime before I end, I'll talk about my piece of legislation that says if it's our tax dollars, it's going to be spent on American-made equipment and American jobs. We're not going to use our tax dollars to buy foreign equipment. That's precisely what Alexander Hamilton told George Washington and the very first Congress of this nation. And they began to implement it. Energy efficiency wasn't there. He did, however, talk about this one. This was one of the 13. He said we needed to have a robust research and development program. They called them patents at that time. We need to be ahead of everybody else. And he wanted to put in policies, and they did become law. And here we have it today, just on these issues alone, these 6 issues. The Founding Fathers said transportation. They said watch the currency. They said Buy America. And they said we need to be ahead with research and patents and be in the cutting edge of technology. What if President Barack Obama's American Jobs Act had been taken up by the Republican leadership that controlled this House? What if they had listened to the Founding Fathers and actually implemented what the President wanted to put in place? 1.3 million, 1,300,000 jobs, perhaps as much as 1,900,000 jobs Americans will be working today. The great what-if question of our time. What if they had listened to the Founding Fathers? Mr. Ellison, I know you have more to say, so please go for it.
Well, Congressman, if we listen to the Founding Fathers, we'd be quite a ways ahead. It's interesting today in the political rhetoric you hear, some people claim the Founding Fathers, but they don't claim the real Founding